Tony Catalano wasn't the smartest guy in the world, but he was dedicated and hard-working. Mr. B repeatedly rewarded him for his years of good service by giving him increasingly important assignments. This was his biggest assignment yet, and Big Tony was determined to prove that Mr. B's trust in him was justified. He studied the man's photo again. I noticed a black Cadillac Escalade parked against the wall in the dimly lit garage. Tony knew that Arthur Clark owed the boss several $1,000,000 for helping Mr. B with some business deal. Tony has been tasked with reminding Clark, the CEO of a large insurance company, that Mr. B doesn't like it when Clark is a few days late on a payment. Give him the Big Tony growl, then threaten to shoot him in the knees if necessary, but under no circumstances shoot him. These businessmen are a bunch of wimps, and he'll probably start crying and begging you not to hurt him. Remind him to call me tomorrow morning to discuss the late fee. Mr. B instructed Tony. Big Tony studied Arthur C. Clark a little. He knew that Clark was a well-groomed, handsome man who kept himself in good condition, with wavy brown hair and dark brown eyes. He drives a 2022 Escalade and is usually the last one out of the building, which means it will be just the two of them in the parking lot. The penultimate leader had left 10 minutes earlier. Tony watched from behind a column as the door to the garage opened. He had to admit he was impressed by Clark. The man, walking to the car, looked 10 years younger than in his photograph. Tony, 6'3" and 16 pounds, walked toward the second man, approaching him as he approached his car. Mr. B is unhappy. "You're late with your payment," Tony growled at the man, who was looking at him in confusion. "Who? I don't know anyone named Mr. B," the man stammered, eyes wide. "Roar!" Tony growled again, pulling a gun from the waistband of his pants. "Nice try, but if you don't want to limp for the rest of your life..." The day was warm, and Tony was sweating profusely. His right hand was covered in sweat, and he began to lose his grip on the gun, waving it in front of the man. He quickly grabbed it again, but in doing so, accidentally pulled the trigger. An almost deafening roar was heard in the garage. Tony watched in horror as blood gushed from the man's crotch. He screamed and fell back. He didn't die, but Tony didn't have much faith in his chances of survival, as he could see that the blood was still flowing. This wasn't part of the plan, and Tony's specialty wasn't thinking on his feet. Tony didn't see an easy way out. In a state of extreme stress, all he could think about was what he had once heard in a pirate movie: dead men tell no tales. Given the circumstances, it seemed logical. He fired a second shot into the center, killing Clark, and left. Mr. B will not be happy about this mistake. Not knowing much about cars, he didn't notice as he drove out of the garage that the Escalade was a 2020, not a 2022. As Gary Finchel lay dying, his mobile phone rang several times before it went to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. The dental office of Dr. Alan Siegel and Dr. Victor Washington was busy Friday when two men who soon identified themselves as police officers approached the receptionist and asked to see Dr. Washington. 10 minutes later, a confused, red-faced Dr. Washington was led out in handcuffs. Victor Washington waited for his lawyer to get to the police station before he agreed to be interviewed. "As I told you guys in my office, I barely knew Gary Finchel. He worked in the same company as my wife. I met him at some events at her office, such as Christmas parties and 4th of July barbecues. I don't think I've said more than 100 words to this guy since Tracy came to work with him 4 years ago." Victor said harshly. "What the hell is going on?" "You know that Mr. Finchel was killed last night, right?" asked the male officer. "Yes, Tracy looked very upset when she found out yesterday. I think she went home from work. I guess she's still at home today," Victor said. Both police officers looked at each other and smiled. Victor and his lawyer did not miss this look. "What are you driving at?" Victor's lawyer asked. "The guy was shot in the groin, and you don't think that we will ignore the cuckolding of his mistress," said the policewoman. Victor Washington nearly fell out of his chair. Wait! Wait! What? He shouted. "Cuckold? My wife? Lover?" Are you saying you didn't know that your wife was having an affair with Gary Finchel, and that you weren't the one who shot his balls off? I'm the Easter Bunny and she's the Tooth Fairy, said the male police officer. You've already admitted that you don't have an alibi for the time of the murder, and you clearly have a motive, buddy. Victor fell into his seat. His lawyer whispered something in his ear. No, seriously. I didn't know, Victor said quietly. He looked blankly at the two policemen. I didn't know, he said in their direction. How do you guys know? The officers looked at each other again, but said nothing. You shot his balls off, Dr. Washington. We understand, the male police officer said. How did you find out that my wife was having an affair with Finchel? The dentist asked again. Your wife left 2 messages on his mobile about meeting him around the same time the crime was committed. She admitted to the affair when we pressed her hard. Lying in his prison bed that evening, Victor had plenty of time to think about his situation. Police have not yet charged him, but they have 48 hours before he is due to be released. Victor was a smart man and knew he should be worried about being accused of murdering someone else, but the news that his wife had cheated on him more than offset his worries about being accused of murder. She and Tracy were married for 26 years and had 2 grown children. Just a few hours ago, Victor believed that he and Tracy were going hand in hand. And now? How long did this romance last? Victor wondered. Why did it start? How could he have missed this? Victor was formally charged with murder Sunday night and was denied bail as a flight risk. He noted to himself that his wife had not attempted to contact him since her arrest. Does she really think that he killed her lover? Victor remembered Wednesday evening. As had been customary for the past year, Tracy was supposedly going to dinner and conversation with her best friend Laura. Victor had never thought about this before because he trusted his wife. As usual, she got home around 8, but for some reason she seemed worried and didn't hesitate to let him know. I didn't see any dishes in the sink. Tell me, did you eat Pop-Tarts for dinner again? For God's sake, Vic, you're not disabled. I know you can cook, she hissed at him. Maybe I don't want to cook when I'm alone. I miss you, baby. I hate these bachelorette parties. Oh, come on, she said, heading to the shower. Tracy's impatience with her husband grew the longer her affair with Gary Finchel continued, but it was only recently that Victor noticed a problem between himself and his wife. Tracy loved her husband very much and was certainly not looking for an affair when her friendship with her immediate superior, Finchel, began to grow. After working closely together for several years, Finchel began to see the possibility of something new, more, when she began to openly talk about her personal life. 5 feet 5 inches tall, weight 119 pounds, a curvy woman with shoulder-length straight black hair, Tracy looked 10 years younger than her 48 years, but seemed very concerned as the 50th anniversary approaches. Gary began to slowly feed her ego with compliments. Not that her husband didn't give her compliments, but Tracy seemed especially pleased with the ones that came from another man. Finchel, married with 2 children of his own, was very careful in his seduction of Tracy, and it was almost a year before he slept with another man's wife. Tracy and her partner usually met for sex once or twice a week. They met for lunch several times a week and spent a lot of time in each other's company. Almost everyone who worked in the office knew about their affair, including Arthur C. Clarke. Victor had his lawyer conduct a financial audit on Monday morning because he no longer trusted his wife. That morning, his children visited him in custody and told him that the tabloids were making a big deal out of a molehill. Cheated hubby shoots wife's lover's nuts, read the headline of one newspaper his son Jared showed him. Well, I have to give the title writer credit for at least being a smart bastard, Victor said quietly. It's not funny, Dad. You're in a lot of trouble here, and you're being clever, his daughter Dee whined. I'm sure everything will work out, baby. I didn't kill him. I swear, Victor told his children. Mom seems to think he killed her. We spent the night in the house, and she spent most of the time with us calling you a murderous bastard. She said you couldn't accept that her boyfriend was a better man, a better lover, Jared said. I finally told her to shut up. Jared grinned at his father. He knew that under normal circumstances, Victor would not tolerate his son using insulting words towards his wife, but these were beyond normal circumstances. Victor chuckled in response, causing Jared to sigh in relief. "I appreciate you protecting me," Victor said. "When did you find out about your mother?" asked his daughter. "Only when I was arrested. I keep telling the police that I didn't know," Victor said. "I loved your mother, but I would never go to prison because she cheated on me. But I wish I knew who killed that bastard, because I'd like to shake his hand." The children looked at each other in complete surprise. They never thought their father would be honest with them. Of course, the children also never thought that their mother would be dishonest with them. But now it could not be denied that she was dishonest with both their father and them. She tried to hide her infidelity by constantly blaming their father for Finchel's murder. She repeatedly told anyone who would listen that the press was crucifying her for a small affair, while her husband, in her opinion, was being acquitted of murder. "Yes, I slept with another man, but your father killed another man. All this damn press cares about is the sexual aspect," she complained to the children. "Well, if my father killed a man, it was only because you had sex with him. It's all about sex," Jared snapped. When state police found a 9mm pistol with the decomposed remains of a large man upstate a few months later, they were immediately suspicious. 2 days after that, a ballistics test on the gun showed a match with a high-profile case that occurred this spring, a case that the media dubbed the betrayed husband. It's not every day that a cuckold husband blows his wife's lover's balls off. The remains were identified as those of Tony Big Tony Catalano, a low-level mafia member affiliated with George Barill's gang. After extensive cross-checking, state and local police were unable to find any connection between Catalano and the man jailed for the murder of Gary Finchel, Dr. Victor Washington. The connection to the jilted husband case again excited the media, and they joined the police in trying to find a connection between the mafia and the insurance company. The police won the race, finally identifying Arthur Clark as the link, but it took an eagle-eyed video technician from one of the city's news stations to piece the pieces together. Robbie Comstock of KRNT News was looking through photographs of the main defendants in both cases when he noticed Gary Finchel's close physical resemblance to his boss, Clark. He then remembered that both men drove black Escalades, with Finchel's car being 2 years older. "What if Big Tony shot Finchel by accident, mistaking him for Clark?" Comstock asked the 2 investigating officers in an off-the-record meeting. "What if Finchel getting his balls shot off was just a weird coincidence?" Further investigation led police to believe the video technician's theory. Several insurance company employees noted that there were jokes in the office that Finchel's grooming and choice of car clearly did not please his boss. George Barill was not very happy with Big Tony when he reported that evening that his mission had gone awry and Clark was dead. The mob boss always tried hard to keep his legendary bad temper in check, but in his business it wasn't always possible. "I told you not to shoot, you fucking idiot!" "What exactly did you not understand?" Barrel barked at the cowardly man. "You shot him twice and killed him." "I screwed up big time, Mr. B. I'm really, really sorry," Tony said remorsefully. "The pistol began to slip out of my hand. I intercepted him and he shot. He was bleeding profusely. I knew he was going to die, and I thought if I just left him there, he might talk. So I finished him off." Barrel thought for a few seconds before answering. "Have Andrew take you to our house on East 9th and sit with you for a few days until we figure out how to get you out of town for a while. He will keep you out of sight and feed you well," Barrel said. "Thank you, Mr. B. I really appreciate it. I'm very sorry that this happened." "Okay, move on, Tony," Barrel said, patting the large man on the shoulder and leading him to the door. Tony's fate was sealed when it turned out that the victim was not Arthur Clark, but one of his employees. Clark left the office for a doctor's appointment earlier that day. "This may not be the worst thing that can happen," Barrel told his chief assistant, Frankie Donatello. "This will definitely show Mr. Clark that we are not to be trifled with. But damn, I always liked Tony, that big stupid idiot." "You know what needs to be done." Donatello nodded and left the room. After Finchell's murder, Tracy's life fell apart. She had no idea that her husband knew anything about her affair and was completely shocked that her gentle, loving husband could kill another person. She suddenly knew real fear, but she took comfort in the fact that the police had arrested him and was being held without bail. While her children were shocked by Tracy's infidelity, she played up their father's murder of her lover to distract attention from the issue of infidelity. It would have worked better if it weren't for the media digging up a story about a cuckolded husband killing his wife's lover, making it front-page news. "Hell, you'd think I was the first woman in town to leave her husband," Tracy whined to her colleague Liz one day over lunch, about 2 weeks after the murder. "According to the damn press, I'm the second coming of the whore of Babylon." "Well, you must admit, it's not entirely usual for your jealous husband to shoot off your lover's balls and kill him," Liz said, giggling, looking at Tracy's face. "Sorry," she muttered quickly. "Almost everyone here knew that you two were tumbling, but how serious is it, Tracy? Did you two love each other? You know, I loved Vic, but Gary and I were turning into someone. Although I think we will never know who we could have become. I can't believe Victor was able to kill someone." "I guess you never really know a person, right?" Tracy said. "I think not," Liz said quietly. The week before, Liz had been with Tracy and several other colleagues at Gary's funeral. She saw Gary's wife give Tracy dirty looks several times and noticed Tracy had her eyes downcast but appeared to be quietly crying throughout the service. She knew Tracy must be a little worried that Gary's widow might get out of hand. Fortunately, nothing bad happened. Tracy tried to stay in the background, away from the widow. Having never been to prison, Victor could not believe how amazing it was to feel like a free man after more than 4 months of imprisonment. "Oh, damn, Lance! Even the air is sweeter, I swear!" he shouted in jubilation as he walked out of prison with his lawyer. The city's district attorney released Victor and dropped the charges against him when police determined that his wife's lover, Gary Finchell, had been shot by another man, Big Tony Catalino. Lance Weatherman took his client to the home he had shared with his wife Tracy for the past 15 years. Tracy was at work as it was barely past noon. He and Lance walked into the house, which looked exactly the same as the last time he saw it, Victor thought. As Lance watched, Victor slowly walked throughout the house, freely touching walls, furniture, even trinkets, as a blind person would. "God, how I miss this place, even knowing what I know now," Victor whispered. Victor walked over to his well-stocked liquor cabinet, knowing that Tracy had never drunk hard liquor, and the cabinet had probably not been touched since he was arrested. There were at least 25 bottles of liquor in various stages of filling. The holiday calls for a single malt," Victor enthused, taking out a half-full bottle of 12-year-old Glenmorangie and pouring glasses for Lance and himself. "Thanks for your help, Lance, and thanks for being there when things were at their lowest," he said. "I know it wasn't just for the salary." He and Lance sipped their drinks in silence. Lance drummed his fingers on the manila folder on the table. "Why do you think she didn't file for divorce while I was in prison?" Victor asked. "In the beginning, probably, because there was so much crap, especially with the hype in the press and everything else. Then she probably just decided that you would do it yourself from prison," Lance replied. "The kids said she was sure I killed her lover and that she hated me for it, so I guess I'm shocked she hasn't done it yet," Victor said. "When she returns home, she will be shocked. Maybe with everything that's going on, she's changed her mind and wants to stay with you. Gary is dead. The kids are mad at her. She's practically a real Cruella de Vil. As they say, the best of the worst," Lance said. Returning home, Tracy didn't recognize the car parked in her driveway. At first she thought it was another reporter looking for an interview, but then she realized whoever it was already inside her house. She dialed 911 and gave the dispatcher all the information. 2 minutes later, 2 uniformed police officers entered Washington's house, joined by Tracy. "My God! What are you doing here?" she shouted to Victor, and both officers raised their weapons. Both Victor and Lance raised their arms above their heads. "Stop! Stop! Stop! I live here. I'm Vic Washington. A few hours ago, I was released from prison. The prosecutor even apologized to me, Victor said. Is it true? I'm his lawyer. He was cleared of all charges, Lance said. One of the police officers called and confirmed this statement. Tracy was shocked. The asshole was just a victim in the story of the poor idiot, Tracy, Victor said. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Besides, why would I even go to jail because of your scruffy ass? You think too highly of yourself. Tracy lowered her head, blushing deeply. The two police officers were about to leave when Lance asked them to testify to something. He handed Tracy a manila envelope and told her she had been served. I don't think I want a divorce, Vic, Tracy rasped. I actually thought you killed Gary, but since you didn't, maybe there is hope for us. Are you fucking delirious, woman? You cheated on me. Forget everything else. Forget even the fact that your betrayal cost me more than 4 months in prison. 4 months, Victor shouted. You told the children that he was the best man, the best lover. Well, I don't need any scraps from Gary Finchell's table. Vic wasn't sure he could ever thank Alan Siegel, his business partner, and his wife Marilyn for the support they gave him during his wrongful imprisonment and divorce. The Siegels visited Victor in prison at least once every 2 weeks, and Alan worked 50 and 60 hours a week, taking on Victor's patients while he was in prison. To get used to his life, Victor took a week off, and then returned to work. He was amazed at how well people treated him, many of whom went out of their way to wish him well. Several women even came up and gave him notes with their names and phone numbers on them. He was embarrassed, but still took them, not wanting to offend anyone. He couldn't get used to the power of the press and social media. His children, Alan and Marilyn, commented on how sympathetic the press was to him while making Tracy and Gary look like villains. What's going on, Vic? 2 years have passed. Your brain works, but not your heart, said Marilyn Siegel, taking Victor's hand in the expensive restaurant where they were sitting. Victor looked up at Marilyn. Over the past few years, he and Alan, as well as his daughter Dee, had been his rock. Marilyn, in particular, made Victor her personal project, often fussing over him like a mother hen. She looked at him and waited patiently. He considered giving her a banal answer, but common sense prevailed. Nothing will be the same again, Mar, said Victor. I can talk to women. I can get them into bed, but there's nothing, no connection. I understand that sex can exist without love, but not for me. Vic, there will be no connection on the first date, or on the second, or on the third. Remember when you fell in love with Tracy? You've been dating her for a long time. You got to know each other. This didn't happen overnight. You are wrong to expect that the one will just magically appear in front of you. After all, you date a woman once or twice, and then move on. It doesn't work that way, says Marilyn. But I'm 52, not 22, Mar. I have no time. Time for love? She interrupted. Jesus, dumbass, it doesn't happen faster just because you get older. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay too, but you have to try first. Marilyn chuckled and then looked questioningly at her friend. She didn't realize it, but she might have been the only person Victor listened to. Coincidentally, Marilyn and Alan began hosting small get-togethers at their home every few months, and they always managed to find a few single women to attend with Victor. Victor was not so stupid as not to understand what Marilyn was doing, and he noted to Alan that Marilyn had very good taste in women. You better watch this, buddy, because if she ever leaves you, she'll have a whole host of beautiful women to choose from, Victor said. Don't think I didn't notice, said his friend. When Victor noticed her, she was reaching up to light one of the 4 mosquito torches that lined the edges of the expansive Siegel veranda. In truth, he noticed her ass in tight jeans and a large area of smooth skin on her back, as when she stretched, her top lifted up. When she turned, he stood silently, a smile playing on his lips, until he realized that she was looking directly at him. Was all that came out of his confused, drugged brain. They tell me this often, she said confidently. Eh? Vic's brain finally caught up with his ears. He finally looked at the woman's face and realized that she was Asian American, with large eyes and straight, shoulder-length black hair. She saw recognition finally appear on his face. I did not have... Kidding. I'm kidding, the woman said. You are not the first who cannot understand for a long time that I am Asian. It usually takes men a while to look me in the face. No, I'm not like that at all, Vic protested, a little too loudly, as several people turned towards the couple. She motioned with her hands for him to lower his voice. He blushed deeply. Dr. Vic Washington, he said, extending his hand for a handshake. I'm Al's business partner. A long time ago. Yes, thanks to the news, I know who you are, the woman said, catching Vic's grimace. I'm Lainey Brand, basically a friend of Marilyn's. I didn't mean to offend you with my comment about the news. I think for you this is about the same as for guys not looking me in the eyes when they talk to me. Fair enough, Vic answered. How about we have a drink and then I'll talk to you, looking you in the face, and you can pretend like you don't think I'm pathetic, making a fool out of the whole country. It was the woman's turn to click her tongue when she realized that she must have been as obvious as Vic was when he was staring at her large breasts. Okay, she said, giving him a shy smile. They talked for the next hour until Victor realized that he had monopolized the woman. He apologized for his social awkwardness and said he would allow her to mingle with the other guests. She told him that she enjoyed his company, after which they went their separate ways and began to communicate with others, although Victor secretly kept her in his sight for the rest of the evening. You know, if you keep looking over your shoulder to keep an eye on her, your neck will hurt, Alan told him at one point. Why don't we switch places so you can look at her directly over my shoulder? This will be much more convenient. Yes, muttered Vic. And I thought I was acting so cool, so cunning. Just so you know, buddy, drooling isn't cool or smart. What do you want to know? According to Alan, Lainey is 3 years younger than Vic. She is Marilyn's longtime friend and works as a reference librarian. Her 20-year marriage ended when she caught her husband cheating with a colleague. She has been single for the past few years. How can a woman with such an appearance remain single for so long? Vic asked. Is she a diva or something? Wow. From what Mar says, she's just a peach, Alan said. But picky, don't consider it necessary to marry a second time, especially if it's to the wrong guy. Understood. Lainey and Vic did not communicate again for the rest of the evening, and she slipped away without giving Vic her phone number. But he wasn't worried because he knew that Marilyn had it. Vic waited 2 days before calling Marilyn. He didn't need to tell her why he was calling. You, sir, have amazing restraint, Marilyn said, instead of starting with the usual pleasantries. Or you're an idiot. Vic was somewhat taken aback. Marilyn rarely swore and almost never swore. I was trying to be cool and not look desperate, Victor said. Did you really greet her with the word, Marilyn mocked. Then why should you worry about looking cool in front of her? You ruined everything with one little 2-letter word. Or maybe it's because of the saliva. Victor was glad that Marilyn couldn't see how red he was. So are you going to call her right now, or are you going to spend 2 days debating the right and wrong way to do this? Asked Marilyn. You're a master debater. We all know that, Marilyn giggled. You always make funny jokes, Mar, said Vic. Can you give me your number now? Of course, but remember that I already told you that you need to build relationships and not wait for them to come to you, said Marilyn. The very next day, Victor invited Lainey to dinner and the following Friday to a movie. He invited her to a very prestigious restaurant and then let her choose the movie. So are you trying to buy favor with this restaurant? Lainey asked. No. To be honest, I didn't know that, Victor answered. I just didn't want to take an Asian woman to a Chinese, Japanese, or Korean restaurant. Well, I'm 3/4 Chinese, but it was from that remaining quarter that I got this, she said, straightening up to her full height and gently swaying her breasts. I know. When you think about a Chinese woman, you imagine a gymnast, right? And definitely not a size 5. Victor blushed, although he didn't know exactly why. He guessed that he was not used to a big-breasted woman talking so openly about her gifts. When he looked up from the table, she was looking straight at him with a slight smirk. "Sorry, I may be a little blunt. Didn't Marilyn warn you?" "Actually, no. And while I'm sure she always makes sure there are a couple of single women present at every meeting, she never tells me anything about them. He says I have to do a little work myself." Lainey laughed cheerfully. As the relationship progressed, Victor discovered that Lainey had no problem laughing heartily when she was having fun. "This is my girl." Lainey was delighted. Vic also learned that Lainey is not shy about crying when she's in the mood, such as at the end of a movie she chose. Apparently, her father died of cancer, as did the father of the leading lady in the film. Victor didn't know about this until Lainey filled him in later, when the couple went to a restaurant to order a late dessert and drink coffee. Victor waited 2 days to call Lainey and set up another date. She readily agreed to the following weekend. At the end of the 5th date, the couple ended up in Victor's bed. About a month later, Marilyn went out to lunch with Lainey. It was only 2 minutes of pleasantries before she asked how things were going between Lainey and Victor. And how could his ex-wife be so stupid? "He's handsome, well-built, a gentleman, and lots of other things," Lainey said, a pinkish tint appearing on her face and neck. "Hell, he even looks me in the eye. Well, most of the time. Except when I wear this red silk dress. But I would commit suicide if at least one man in this dress did not spend most of the evening looking at my breasts." Both women smiled. Dr. Victor Washington could well claim that he was already married at this point. In reality, the wedding took place only 6 months later. The announcement in the local newspaper of the wedding of Dr. Victor Washington should not have received more than a minor mention, let alone such a large article that it appeared in newspapers across the country. The media simply could not let the wedding of the jilted husband pass without a full review of this whole sordid story. "Damn bastards!" George Beryl shouted over the phone to Arthur Clark, throwing the newspaper across the room. "Every time one of them does something, another article appears in the newspapers about the abandoned husband, and then the press starts snooping around again. That traitor still works for you, right?" "Yes," Clark replied, not understanding where this conversation was going. "Bury this bitch," Beryl hissed. "Send her to a place where the press will never find her." 2 weeks later, a very disgruntled Tracy Washington was running a 2-person firm's office in Paducah, New York. The incessant press coverage made her unemployable anywhere else on a decent salary, and although she was doing well financially after the divorce, with no family or social life to speak of, work was all she had left. Vic did not expect that when he came to host the reception on Monday morning, there would be a note from George Beryl in the middle of his desk. The note was sealed, and Vic didn't know who sent it until he read it. It was an invitation, if Beryl's request could be called an invitation, to meet the mafia boss in his office for lunch that same day at noon. The note said that the meeting would be just for the two of them. Vic had never met Beryl in person, but like many, he knew of the alleged connection between Beryl and the death of the man who cuckolded him. He wondered why he had been called, but of course he had no intention of ignoring the invitation. After a thorough search, Vic was led into Beryl's office by the mountain man, who, it seemed, was not having a good day. He was led to a table off to the side, already set with what appeared to be a sumptuous lunch of Italian dishes. Beryl introduced himself, shook the dentist's hand, and invited him to sit down. "It's just us here, and this office is checked daily for bugs, so we can both talk freely," Beryl said. "I owe you an apology in some way. As I'm sure you know, I changed the course of your life. It was a mistake of epic proportions, I assure you. It shouldn't have affected you in any way. Damn, I didn't even know who you were, who your wife was." "Mr. Beryl, if I may interrupt you," Victor said, puzzling Beryl with a beaming smile. "There is no need to apologize to me. In fact, you have done me a great favor." Beryl looked at Victor as if he had grown a second head. Victor stopped, took a sip from the glass of 15-year-old Pappy Van Winkle bourbon that Beryl had poured, and smiled again. Really amazing," Victor said, while Beryl glared at him, waiting for an explanation. "Oh yeah, sorry. So, like I said, like I told the cops, I had no idea my wife was cheating on me. And you not only warned me about this, but you also did what I could only dream of when you eliminated her lover. And the groin shot is just a wonderful cherry on the cake. God, I hope your guy waited a little while before putting that second bullet in him. 4.5 months in prison is worth his death. So thank you, and I'm completely sincere. Well, I think if you don't mind, then I'll stop feeling guilty. For health, both men nodded to each other, finished their glasses and slammed them on the table. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.